backed him. That used to be considered bad form. Now they've tried to make anyone who worked for him, they made sure that they couldn't get any job in the future. Then they moved on. They raided Mar-a-Lago. They tried to imprison him. They tried to kill him now multiple times. The media has not accepted Donald Trump as a viable candidate, and they're still calling him literally Hitler. But after all of that, Donald Trump remains. So here to break it down with me is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News. So Matthew, before we get to November 5th, what am I missing on that list?
Oh, how many things we don't have all night to talk about everything they tried to do to him every day of the week, every major institution, every powerful figure in America. I mean, we could add Steve Bannon just getting out of jail for, contempt, which no one else goes to jail for. Peter Navarro, who we just had on the show, who also did time because he was merely associated with Donald Trump doing otherwise normal things. And so what they've done the entire time is say, this is abnormal. This is not normal political times. They are the ones who started this, right? The other side, the Democratic Party, they started saying, this is not normal what's happening, because Trump and everyone who supports him is bad and different. So they're the ones who broke us out of normal political time. And then in their zeal against him and all of his supporters, by the way, anyone who supports him, they demonized half the country. And they did it again and again and again. They haven't stopped. They turned the cultural commercial machine, all the power in the engine, all the way up to 11 for all these years, 9 years now. And you can say maybe it's sputtering, maybe it's running out of juice, but that's still the momentum that we've seen this entire time. But yet, as you said, at the end of the day, they haven't gotten rid of Donald Trump from the political scene.
And the left is the one that tries to say, oh, they need to tone the political rhetoric down. And yet here we are in these conversations leading up to the last few days now, running up to the election. And the only thing that they seem to have is, well, he's literally Hitler, right? They keep throwing that back at the Republicans' faces because, again, they're trying to turn out their vote. We know that. And they have nothing else to stand on right now. But these old, we did this on the show earlier. You go back to the 40s and they were trying to say, oh, Hitler, watch out.
Yeah, it's sad because of what they've done is they've really destroyed kind of the fundamental social compact in America by saying, no, this is not about party anymore. It's not about two parties fighting in policy. This is about our very form of government. And, it doesn't take being a psychologist to think like, why would you say that? And maybe there's a little bit of projection going on here because maybe we are in a sort of oligarchic state that's losing its Republican or Democratic character. And they're sort of trying to hide that. They have become the party of power, right? Every major institution. This is what's crazy, right? You can go both ways with this, hopeful and maybe not so hopeful. But the hopeful part of it is the major legacy media institutions, right, have nonstop told people this is not a legitimate choice. This is not a legitimate candidate. This person is bad, fundamentally will ruin the very fabric of America and rip it apart. And they've done that for 9 years. And yet we are on the cusp of an election in which it is too close to call.
Dare we take a peek around the corner? The last time Donald Trump was elected, the day after his inauguration, they held the Women's March, you may remember, that they didn't even let him go out there and just take over, right? Like they were protesting him before he really did anything. Yeah. So when we look at this, what happens if Donald Trump wins this time around?
Well, if Donald Trump wins this time around, I think as we'll probably talk about with Chris today, a little bit with Bedford, I think you're going to see a real snap, right? It's a real victory culturally. They might still try to stymie him. The administrative state might throw up everything you could imagine, right, in his face and basically try to ruin his administration. They're going to do that regardless. If he wins, they're going to throw up. Russian collusion will look like child's play compared to what they're going to try to do, right? But culturally, it is sort of over, I think, at that point, because the media went all in. They're the ones who changed the game. They're the ones who went all in with this insanity. And that went from Russian collusion, right, all the way up until recently with literally Hitler and, oh my gosh, this comedian made a joke about Puerto Rico. This is beyond the pale. This is a Nazi. Once you do that, right, your credibility is staked on that, and you tell lie after lie after lie, that's one thing. Half the country will still go along with your lies, right? But if then you're defeated, right, after all that in a second election, when Trump comes back, he doesn't go away, and he comes back in triumphant. I mean, that's the arc of an incredible novel, right? That's like a world historical event. He comes marching back into D.C. after being, after being rejected, after all this happens to him. That's a story that people want to get behind. And what I would say is that's impossible to come back from.
When I look at this, you're talking about the media. And if the media is doing all of these things and nobody's out there listening to them, at what point, I mean, nobody's really listening to legacy media anyway, but doesn't that make what BlazeTV is doing just that much more impactful right now?
Yeah, look, this is the whole point. This is why I'm here. This is why you're here. This is what we're doing this for a reason. We're doing this because we know the moment that we're in. And if Trump wins, right, then the path to victory looks like a direct competition with legacy media because they are losing support. They are losing money already. And you're going to see a lot of people, as you already see, people who are in power looking around, even people like Zuckerberg walking back a little bit, right? Bezos, Washington Post walking back a little bit. You see, and never mind Musk out there belligerently saying we need something new. So all of a sudden, right, you change the framework and companies like Blaze can and should and will rise. And that's what we're here to do. We're not here to just provide you with an alternative, media. The goal here is to take over. The goal here is, right, to create a billion-dollar company that fulfills the vision that Glenn Beck had when he walked out of Fox News because of the unjust way in which they treated him. That's the goal.
Well, and if you go out there and vote on election day, then on election night, come back and hang out with us because here at Blaze Media, we're going to be hanging out with Glenn Beck, yes, Steve Deace, Allie Beth Stuckey, Liz Wheeler, so many more of your favorite Blaze TV hosts. Because we're going to have the coverage from all across the country. We're going to have correspondents out everywhere. And we know what's at stake, right? So if you can't watch legacy media, one, they're lying to you right now as we are in the final few days leading up to it. But people should come hang out with us on election night.
Yeah, look, I mean, you're going to get all the Blaze hosts that you already know and like. So everyone's going to be here. And those who aren't here will be out and about and scouring the country in the places that you would want to be. Or they're going to places where you wouldn't want to be, like outside of, Kamala's coven there, whatever they're going to do. I don't know. But so we'll have people all over. And this is the time when it's just going to be more fun. It's going to be more fun to be live with Blaze people going back and forth, talking about all the things as it comes in, streaming live. I mean, what more? This is what Blaze has done the last few years so well, So that's just a great time and a no-brainer. But again, we're all there together because this matters. Because we have to win. The voting you have to go out and vote. This has to happen. And if it does, we're going to be able to build the media of the future in an accelerated way that people would never have dreamed was possible even a few years ago.
Yes, so come hang out with us. All you have to do is go to blazeelection.com/BNT and you can get $40 off. It's the biggest discount that we've ever done. So blazeelection.com/BNT. And I'm so looking forward to Tuesday. Now, again, I don't know what's going to happen on Tuesday night, but I just want to be hopeful and optimistic until we get to that point. But Peterson, I do think that we have to look at what happens if Kamala Harris does win. And what does that mean for places like Blaze?
Yeah, this is where I have to say, if you haven't gone out and voted yet, just stop just pause it and go do that, because this is how important this is. If Harris wins, I'm never one to say it's over. It's never over. There's always a path. You can be kidnapped by the bad guys and put in a locked room and there's no way out. There's always a way out. There's always a path to success. Sometimes it's not as likely as others, right? So you never give up. But if Kamala wins, for companies like Blaze, this matters a lot, because what it means is there'll be no punishment, no accountability for any of the censorship, for any of the ways in which government colluded with private companies, you're going to signal all of a sudden back to private corporations that unless they're brave and they come out against the government, right, and the powers that be, which a lot of them really aren't at the end of the day, then they gotta fall in line. And what does that mean for Blaze practically? It means when we put these videos on YouTube, like this one today, now we have to be careful about what we say. Otherwise, we can get dinged, and then the videos come off, and you lose money. This means when we put stuff on Facebook, right? If Facebook lets us do well, we will reach hundreds of thousands, if not millions more people. You're talking millions and millions of dollars that is taken away from Blaze because of the censorship, every month. I mean, it's crazy stuff. So if the floodgates open, if Trump wins, if Kamala wins, we know that the censorship is coming, and then we have to rethink our approach, right? We become resistance dissident media, which is great, but we need to think about that in a smart way and accelerate efforts to get off of the usual stack, the tech stack that, is controlled by the other side. We need to think about the kinds of content that can kind of signal wink, wink to everyone out there that we're on your side, right? How you live your life, all that kind of stuff. And it becomes much harder to directly, it becomes harder to directly lead, right? You're more reacting to the other side because she's going to come after us.
The way that I look at it, no matter what happens on November 6th, it has to be full steam ahead for the conservative movement. It will take a different look and feel depending on if Donald Trump wins or if Kamala Harris wins. But this is the time that we were made for.
Yeah, this is, you don't get to choose it. This is it. This is it right here and now. And, again, voting, it's not just voting, it's finding other people and getting them to vote. It's actually that way. 10,000 votes could change everything for the next, for this future of our country. That's where we're at right now. And that's why the voting is so important. And either way, there is a path, right? Either way, it's going to, but everything is going to be determined strategically by the results of this election, which each and every one of you out there has a real role to play. You are part of this story. It's not a story, it's real life. The narrative is real life, and you're part of it, and it's epic, and it's happening this week.
Yes, we are writing that narrative as we speak. And you mentioned voting for the first time. Well, we're going to have Jason Whitlock on the show a little bit later. He has already voted for the first time, so we'll talk to him about that. But when we come back, Chris Bedford will help us break down early voting numbers. Don't go anywhere. Do Trump's early voting numbers indicate a victory on Tuesday night? Well, a recent piece on theblaze.com suggests that it could. Here to discuss with us is Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford. So, Chris, what do you think? I mean, should we really be reading into these early voting numbers? And can I get some fries with that, Bedford?
Right now, I'm on a busy mission to save the dogs and cats. But after that, extra nuggets, extra fries, extra sauce. Listen, the early voting numbers, I think, are generally looking very good for Republicans right now. Women are leading in the vote, which is typically not a great sign for Republicans. The last couple of years has not been. But if you look at the actual polling numbers, the last one that Fox did, for example, in Pennsylvania, showed that 49% of women in the Keystone State were favoring Donald Trump. So it's not necessarily a bad sign. Also, in order to do it, you have to assume there's some kind of three-dimensional chess going on. Maybe it is always, of course, possible. Men need to get out there and vote. Men like Donald Trump more than women do, that's for sure. But more Republicans are registering in all these states. More Republicans are showing up to early voting. So kind of relying on sex as opposed to actual party registration, I would say that is less an indicator of how people are voting this time.
Interesting. And in terms of you voting tonight, I assume this is going to take you through Halloween?
Oh, absolutely.
Excellent.
I'm going to be taking part I'm going to be leading the children's Halloween parade all through our neighborhood, taking candy and giving it away.
We need to send Julio Rosas out to get that. So we see you leading the parade in such fine regalia. So, here we are. The numbers look good. Momentum is there. Is there anything unexpected or anything you're looking at in the next few days? I mean, we're all paying in rapt attention. We're all going over the waterfall together. But is there anything in particular that you look to as a bellwether?
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Of course, we're going to be waiting on that. I think we're going to have a very good idea of just how long or short the night is going to be based on returns you start to see in Tuesday in Pennsylvania. And the word that thought is not just shared by me. It seems to be shared by somebody or a group of people in the Keystone State who have been getting police officers, for example, to send voters home early. It takes a lot in that state because it's got partisan judges who come up through the ranks, who have to prove their mettle to the party machine, essentially, in order to even get that judgeship. It takes a lot for one of them to say, hold on a second, this is voter suppression that I'm seeing right now. Now you have to change the dates and extend the time people can vote. And we talked about this the other night. That was in Bucks County, a swing county. You're starting to see stories like that pop up all over, not just there, but in other swing states. So there's going to be a lot of fake news out there. There's going to be a lot of conspiracy theories out there. But fortunately, or unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of real stories out there. Wait and watch for those. Which ones are verified? Those are often going to be the troubling spots. And Republicans are actually geared up to fight on those sorts of areas. But it's still actually, by any account, a close race. The vibes, which is what Democrats are relying on, are strongly with the GOP right now. Voter turnout is down dramatically in some of the blue states, blue areas that you'd expect it to be up. It's up dramatically in the red areas that normally don't vote early. But at the same time, the margin is completely within the margin of error. Dan McCarthy had a good piece earlier today where he pointed out the Republicans seem to be acting like they're 6 points ahead in Pennsylvania when they're actually 0.6 points ahead. That ain't going to cut it in an election. That's not enough to rest on your laurels. So who knows what the weather's going to be like Tuesday? People need to be paying attention. People need to actually be committed. And they need to get out there.
Well, one of the stories that sounds false but is actually true was Joe Biden labeling Trump supporters garbage. We talked about it yesterday on the show, but Chris, in a brilliant media strategy, Trump continued to push in on that and ran a media briefing from a garbage truck. Listen.
How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden.
I mean, you're dressed up right there as the McDonald's Donald Trump. We got Garbage Man Donald Trump last night. What are your thoughts on him?
I know. I've got the wrong costume now. Way behind. I can't keep up with his ability to completely reshape what presidential candidates are able to do. I mean, it was basically political accepted wisdom that politicians should never put on any kind of a costume. The famous one, of course, is Dukakis in a tank, but it goes all the way to Calvin Coolidge looking like a goofball, as awkward as heck, in an Indian headdress back in the day. It never looks good when politicians dress up, but Donald Trump, because he's legitimate and he's comfortable and he's self-deprecating and he makes fun of himself, he had some laugh out loud lines at last night's rally, is actually able to pull it off in a way that I think could reshape future American politics. Is probably going to lead to a lot of extremely cringy moments as other candidates who don't have his abilities are able to or try to dress up the same way. And it kind of goes back to something I noticed about him in 2016. When I first got to the campaign trail, I believed all the hype that this was a billionaire removed from everyday people's concerns. He was a TV star. He was a germaphobe. He wasn't going to be out there holding babies and shaking hands. And the man I saw in New Hampshire and in Iowa was completely the opposite. And it was noticeable the way that other Republicans played fake dress up. So they have Republicans and Democrats have three different costumes they wear. When they're talking to working class voters, they take off their jacket and tie, they roll up their sleeves, and they pretend they're one of them. When they're talking to middle class voters, they put on a jacket and tie. And when they're talking to country club wealthy voters, they take off the tie and the jacket again, and they put on a vest over their shirt. I guess that's a big country club thing. But I saw it over and over again. And no matter where you went, Donald Trump would be wearing his Brioni suit and a trucker hat, hanging out with guys who were wearing Vietnam War hats, hanging out with people at diners, hanging out with billionaires. He got along with any of them. And I think it's probably because he was just more comfortable in his skin than a lot of these other politicians were. He wasn't actually trying to fake. He is a generational political talent, and that allows him to pull this off And unfortunately, I suspect, or maybe fortunately for the lulls, we are in for 10, 20 years of candidates trying to copy this amazing style.
That I do not look forward to, but but we must enjoy it while we have it. And speaking of which, in the minute we have left with you, we have to talk about what Brian Stelter wrote. Just unbelievable piece in I believe New York Magazine, where he talks about an anonymous TV executive saying these words, which are music to all of our ears. I've been waiting for this moment for so long. Quote, "If half the country has decided that Trump is qualified to be president, that means they're not reading any of this media." And we've lost this audience completely. A Trump victory means mainstream media is dead in its current form. What do we think about this?
I think he's right. And I think Stelter's late to his own funeral. And even for those people who are reading it, like you and me, we all three of us read this stuff all day. We just find it extremely unpersuasive, find it extremely dishonest. I mean, CBS is a company that previously has shown how biased it is, mainly by exclusion. What stories they decide not to cover versus what stories they tend to hype up leads towards their liberal bias. They've taken the mask off and the gloves off. They look like complete and total fools in their headlines, their anchors, their debate coverage. The media is melting down. And Stelter is actually much, much younger than he looks. He's like 38 or something. Is someone who hasn't been around for a huge amount of time. It doesn't seem to have an actual grasp of history, which you'd think you would. There's something to the media having to acknowledge that maybe it's our job to report. Maybe it's our job to let people decide, and that the American people have really never been particularly interested in being told what to think, who to love, who to hate, how to vote. And that this media that feels like it's their job to tell you all these things, well, that's stupid. I mean, that was my takeaway from 2016 when I was writing, I think rather foolishly, about some of my political opinions and telling people this or that. It ends up not actually mattering. And those people who watched what National Review did with its big gold and purple issue against Trump, and they watched what CNN has done, what MSNBC has done, what the New York Times and Washington Post have done, and had not taken away that maybe this isn't the proper role of the media. Maybe there's no power here. Maybe this is stupid and is losing our trust. Well, I don't even know what they've been paying attention to, because the lesson is as clear as day.
It absolutely is. Donald Bedford, thank you so much for reporting from Washington,
Thank
D.C.
you.
We'll catch you tomorrow.
See you then.
Peterson, fake news is now crushing legacy media. Donald Trump has basically been a one-man wrecking ball.
Yeah, and since the time he appeared on the scene, it was apparent. It reminded me as if he was wrestling with the mainstream media over a weapon, a spear, right? And he drove that spear right into them. They came after him with it, and he turned it around, and they couldn't stop attacking him. And the more they do, the more they show that they failed, especially if after everything else they lose. That feels to me like what really snaps the back of the whole thing.
And he's redefining what it's going to be like for future presidential campaigns, as Chris mentioned earlier. Stay with us. When we come back, Jason Whitlock will explain how the sports world is becoming MAGA country. Just ahead. MAGA gear is having a moment. Texas Tech's kicker showed support for Trump, rocking the Trump 24 MAGA shirt proudly. And it's clear that openly conservative fashion is in style again. So what's behind this trend? Here to break it down for us is Jason Whitlock. He's the host of BlazeTV's Fearless. So Jason, I want to ask you, is this more of a bold move, or is this absolutely a sign of shifting attitudes?
It's a sign of a cultural shift. Men are moving beyond their irrational fear of woke culture and being canceled, and are starting to be real comfortable expressing their opinions and dealing with whatever blowback there is. And there's a lot less of it, to be quite honest with you. Ever since Elon Musk took over Twitter and turned it into X, the athletes just aren't nearly as afraid of Twitter backlash and social media backlash as they used to be, because there's just not as much of it. And you can now be an out of the closet Trump supporter without risking your job.
Jason, as you know, we also have Nick Bosa getting in trouble, apparently, he's going to face retaliatory action for wearing a MAGA hat in a post-game interview. And we wonder, would that happen if he's wearing a Kamala Harris hat? I personally don't think so. But it leads to this larger question, and I've seen people out there saying, look, you guys you're fine with this. This is a double standard because you all were very upset with athletes talking about politics when they came out for the left, mentioning Colin Kaepernick and others. What are your thoughts about that?
These guys all have degrees in false equivalency. It's like that's all colleges and universities must be handing out is false equivalency degrees, because Colin Kaepernick took a knee during the national anthem and basically stated and inferred that America is inherently racist, and it's no different in America today than it was in 1850. And he's basically sending that signal during the national anthem. LeBron James has made comments over social media that like black men can't go out on the streets, they'll get killed by police. That's completely different than someone saying, hey, I'm supporting Donald Trump. What Nick Bosa did isn't controversial, and you're 1,000% right. If he had come out and said, hey, I'm voting for Kamala Harris, all the people whining and crying would be celebrating him and saying, oh, look at how courageous he is, and blah, blah, blah. There's no equality here in what Bosa did as opposed to what Colin Kaepernick did when he was a 49ers quarterback. Kaepernick's deal brought the national into it, was intentionally divisive. I don't think Nick Bosa is trying to be divisive. I think he's trying to say, hey, I'm a Trump supporter and I'm enthusiastic about it and I'm not ashamed of it. Acknowledging I'm not ashamed of my beliefs isn't the same as, hey, I'm taking a knee because America is inherently racist and I want to make this point during the national anthem during a traditional time when we're all coming together to celebrate the country. Colin Kaepernick saying, nope, let's throw a pity party and whine and cry about a resisting felon who lost his life while resisting arrest.
Well, Jason, the outrage of the day is the Puerto Rican joke by Tony Hinchcliffe. And if we stick with the 49ers, we have the offensive lineman, John Feliciano, who came out. He's Puerto Rican himself and said, you know what? This joke is politically motivated, right? We all saw it there at Madison Square Garden. We all know that it was a joke. So are we finally seeing athletes weighing in on controversies from the right, right? We've already seen it with Colin Kaepernick and everybody on the left, but now is it happening on the right?
Look, it's just these guys are being authentic. This guy's in an NFL locker room. Can you imagine? I can, because I used to frequent locker rooms throughout all of my childhood years, all the way through college, and then as a journalist for 25, 30 years. The jokes that get cracked in a locker room and saying Puerto Rico, which has a garbage problem that has been reported by the media, and a guy cracking a joke that Puerto Rico is a garbage island. Anybody with a brain knows, like, this isn't remotely offensive. This is comedy from a comedian. We all go to comedy clubs to laugh at inappropriate jokes and things that would be offensive said other places. It's just people are moving into reality. I want to connect it to something much larger. Jeff Bezos. This is why, Jill and Matt, I'm so optimistic about what's going to happen on Tuesday. When you see someone like Jeff Bezos, who obviously founded Amazon, owns the Washington Post, and now is trying to push the Washington Post towards the center, or at least in a direction towards the right. And he puts out a statement that says, look, man, reality is undefeated. He's basically saying, like, hey, this fake world that the Matrix was supposed to have, that everybody was supposed to abide by the rules in this fake world. Jeff Bezos is saying, hey, it's not going to work, guys. Reality is undefeated. America's not going for it. Half the public has no trust in us, and the other half knows we're BSing them. This is very significant. When you see Jeff Bezos, when you see Elon Musk, when you see Mark Zuckerberg get out of the content business, apologize for his role in the 2020 election, what you're looking at is three of the most wealthy men in America all start moving towards the center and towards conservative, because not Elon Musk, but certainly Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg, they know, like, the American public hasn't gone for their BS. And on Tuesday, there's going to be a reckoning, and they want to be on the right side and say, we jumped ship on the fantasy world the left created before everyone else. I'm not overconfident, but I'm very confident about Tuesday. I'm very confident about which direction the culture is going. The people with money are moving our direction. The athletes are starting to move our direction. What a time to be alive.
It is. I mean, it is amazing. And I appreciate what you're saying, because you voted for the first time, right? Already. You've already voted. And now you're sitting back and watching this unfold. And from that perspective, what you're saying is you see this surge. You see a cultural surge, right? That's what I'm picking up. What do you think?
I've wet my finger, and the wind is blowing our direction, Matt. We're all going to be billionaires come Wednesday, Matt.
I'm ready, willing, and I'll get tanned and rested if I have to. But so what are the obstacles that you think? Like, what are the things you think, like, well, what's in the way come Tuesday?
Well, we can't get complacent and overconfident. But also we can't see Tuesday as a finish line. Tuesday is just like, hey, we've taken the lead. Now let's extend that lead. Let's make sure we're doing the work and support and all because man, there's a lot of institutions that need to be rebuilt. There's a lot of leadership that needs to be eradicated and erased and replaced with real leadership. There's a lot of work to do come Wednesday. Come Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's not just this one day of voting, which is obviously critical, but we're going to have to stay engaged. And I'm talking about myself here because, again, I haven't been engaged in politics the way that perhaps I should have been. But we're going to have to get engaged and get involved and make sure that we take advantage of the opportunity we have in this moment. And continue to put pressure and continue to stand tall and commit to never being silenced again, never being controlled by fear of, oh, they'll call me racist. Oh, they'll call me an Uncle Tom. Let them call us names. Those are all compliments in my book. We're the actual real rebels. We're on the side of truth, and we need to stand firm and confident in that and boldly. I hope everybody come Wednesday is wearing some sort of red MAGA hat or some sort of Trump. Tuesday night and Wednesday morning should be the biggest party and celebration maybe since 1776. Or what day did we declare victory in the July the 4th?
There you go. It is going to be a big day, hopefully, here for everybody in this audience, at least. So, you know what? The tide is shifting. Jason Whitlock was out there voting for the first time, and we really appreciate you coming and breaking it all down for us here today.
Thank you, guys.
When we come back, we'll explain why progressivism might be the real monster under the bed. Stay tuned. Today is Halloween, and with all the costumes and candy, we can't help but wonder, what are the real-life monsters out to get our souls? In a recent piece for Blaze News, Hailee Boyd asked just that question, and she joins us right now to discuss it. So, Hailee, what are the monsters that are out there trying to get us in the real world?
Well, there are quite a few. In this article, I look specifically at werewolves and vampires, kind of the lore surrounding them. But then I connect them to monsters that we see in our everyday, especially in the West, in America. And I connect vampires to abortion, the abortion movement, and the monstrosities going on there. And then as I also connect werewolves to the transgender movement and the monstrosities going on there.
Can you unpack that a little bit? Like, what's the relationship between vampires and abortion and werewolves to transgender?
Absolutely. So basically, I make the case that there are real demonic entities and they inspire things like vampires and werewolves. So if we look at history, every culture across time has some version of the vampire, some version of the werewolf. And so it stands to reason that there's something true there, right? Like when we talk about cliches, the reason that something is a cliche is because there's something true there. So I kind of look at the vampire and the werewolf in that way, not to say that these are real in the flesh, but that something real inspired them. And I think those things, those are very real things that are attacking us now. And so if you think about vampires, bloodlust, right, comes to mind, the consuming of blood. And we see that so much in the abortion movement and just the demand for unfettered abortion. And then werewolves are shapeshifters. Satan was a shapeshifter. And we see that in, I think, the transgender movement, the same idea of a rejection of our God-given nature to become some grotesque version of ourselves.
Well, I think that we all know that we're in a spiritual battle, and I think that more people are actually waking up to that right now. So do you think that some of this is still lost, though, on conservatives today?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we see that with how angry we get at people. So just last week, my pastor was talking about we need to hate ideologies, we need to hate ideas, we need to attack ideologies and ideas. We can't attack people and hate people. And so I think, especially in an election season, that's so contentious. I think that's absolutely what's going on. A lot of people forget Ephesians 6:12 talks about we can't be battling flesh and blood. That's not where our ultimate battle is. It is with the demonic principalities and spirits. And so I think that's an important thing to remember in an election season like this.
So, I mean, have you both seen this actual satanic, like, Church of Satan abortion center they're setting up? I believe it was in Florida.
Yes.
I mean, and just to see that just put out there in that bold sort of way, you see this more and more. I mean, for the point you're making, certainly you see people making the connection on the other side to a kind of, well, I would call evil, a spiritual dimension. So I do wonder if what your thoughts about why it's revealing itself now, because, and I'll just as a word of encouragement, I'll say one of the things about history is if you study it, this is a blip of time where we sort of imagined that, we're secular. This is a secular society. I just don't believe that has ever existed, because everyone you talk to who says they're secular, the next second they're talking about their horoscope or whatever, right. Or talking about some spiritual, aspect. So I think we kind of psyoped ourselves into this situation, and it's just a blip. But why do you think this is starting to come out now?
Well, I think it's because we're rejecting our Judeo-Christian heritage in the West. We see it certainly in America, we see it in Europe. We were founded on Christian principles, and the left especially wants to completely uproot those, want to completely reject. And they cite, separation of church and state, which there's certainly something there, but separation of church and state does not mean that we reject our principles. It does not mean that we reject our foundation. It simply means we don't become a Britain 2.0 and declare a national religion. So I think the farther we get away from our Judeo-Christian principles, the more darkness has free reign to just terrorize.
And Hailee, it feels like to me that this election, we all know how important this election is in particular, but it seems to be the one where it's the most clearly divided, right? They are openly saying abortion on demand, right? All of those things that they used to hide, they used to try and tamper down. Now they aren't scared of going out. So what do you see just with this 2024 election cycle?
Well, I mean, it blows my mind that we have somebody like Tim Walz who could potentially be our VP, hopefully not. But I mean, and he repealed the law that demanded that babies born of botched abortions get life-saving care. That does not happen. That doesn't have to happen in Minnesota. And to think that there are millions of Americans that are voting for that, calling for that. And then the same thing with the transgender movement. People, same thing with Tim Walz. He passed legislation that allowed children to be transitioned behind their parents' back. That is just bold, in your face evil. So yeah, that's what I see. It's discouraging.
How'd you come up with this idea?
So it's actually kind of a strange sequence of events. A couple months ago, I was listening to an episode of the Steve Day Show, and he interviewed Ben Garrett and Brian Sauvé, who have this really interesting podcast called Haunted Cosmos.
I saw this one.
It's so interesting. And so basically what they do, I look at this as more of I'm going to look at these creatures and see, kind of like the demonic entities inspiring them and how those manifest in today's issues, but they actually look at vampires and werewolves and Bigfoot and fairies and UFOs and all these different things, anything under the scope of the supernatural. And they ask, could these things be real in the flesh and blood? And does the Bible corroborate them? Fascinating stuff. So I've been listening to those. That podcast has me in a chokehold. And then I also work for Blaze, and so I'm in the news cycle every day. So those two bodies of thought kind of collided, and here we are.
Well, today is Halloween. So is there any way to go out there and celebrate Halloween without saying, okay, here's all the demonic stuff that goes along with it?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, it's my son's first Halloween, and he is dressing up as a goose, and it's adorable. And we are going to hand out candy to the kids in our neighborhood, and there are pumpkins on my front porch, right? I think the spirit knows, like your spirit knows when something is evil. Your spirit knows when something is good. So absolutely, go out, have candy, dress up as nice things, maybe not things that represent death and the demonic, but yeah, I think there's a way to celebrate.
Peterson, what are your kids going to be this year?
I have to say, my 14-year-old asked for my MAGA hat and a red tie. So
Heck yeah, that's awesome.
So that's at least one of them taken care of. Yeah.
Awesome, very good.
It's going to be good. And by the way, Halloween starts as a Christian holiday, we should say. All Souls, that both Protestants and Catholics celebrate. So it's not as if we have to go back to, everything has pagan roots. It gets ridiculous after a while.
They like to change history, though. That's the way that they do it. But Hailee, thanks so much for coming in here. We can't wait to have you on the show again.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Don't go anywhere. We'll have some final thoughts next. Well, happy Halloween, everyone. Chris Bedford was so 10 days ago. He was Donald Trump at McDonald's. Please, if we're going to dress up as Donald Trump, we have to do the latest and greatest. And I want to do like the little like Donald Trump like when he was dancing out there, because that to me, Matthew, is the best thing that we've seen from Trump so far in the entire media cycle. And it seems like every single day that goes by, he is continually to up the game, making it harder for future presidential candidates to come out. And I mean, the bar is going to be set so high with what he's been able to do that even just donning, a little vest and going out there and picking up garbage is now just going to be the coolest thing that people have even ever thought of.
Yeah, well, I think he's following your lead, Jill. I mean, every day that goes by, you're upping the game of host, and he's following along. No, I think what we've seen is something that actually we shouldn't be surprised by with Donald Trump, and that is since the beginning, since 2015, since the whole 2016 rigmarole, all of it, he's always been ahead of the curve when it comes to and outside of the box when it comes to how he campaigns. And, he needed to adjust when everything was censored. Remember, they took away his direct access to the people when they took away Twitter and all of that. And they started censoring people who mentioned anything about the election in 2020. So what you're seeing now is him regaining his 2016 form where he leads the news cycle. And it's not just by tweeting, it's by going out and doing things like this that are not just symbolic, but sort of wholesome and just, I mean, you can't really describe, right, the effect of seeing him with those French fries, just happy, clearly he was into that one, and the trash truck as well. I mean, the garbage man. You can't describe the impact it has, but it is similar to what he's been all along. He just continues to find new ways to reach the people when the media puts up obstacles in his path.
I would say, don't the Democrats know what they're doing when they're coming out and saying that Trump supporters are garbage? But it was Joe Biden that made that comment, so I don't know if he actually knows what he was saying or not. But Donald Trump is so good at taking the insult and being an everyman and just owning the news cycle with that movement.
Yeah. So one of the things, the reason that Donald Trump is able to put on, uniforms and whatever, and still be cool and have such a great impact, as opposed to other politicians, because let's face it, other politicians do this, right? We're used to growing up. It was like put on the hunting uniform, right, or walls out there with a shotgun. We're worried he's going to shoot someone. They all do this. Why can he do it? And I would say I would borrow from my pal Matthew Marsden, who's also a contributor on this program as an actor. I take this to heart when it comes to politics. It's very true. He's comfortable in his own skin. He knows who he is, right? And you know that he knows who he is. You know he's not pretending he's, fry man. He's enjoying, being in that role. But he's comfortable in his own skin, and therefore he's able to sort of take on these other roles and say, hey, I'm with you, in a way that's authentic, even though he's a billionaire, because he knows who he is. And it's like Chris said earlier today on the show, right? He doesn't do the usual like dress up in suits for various people. He knows I always wear a suit. That's what I wear, except when, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to McDonald's for real and work there. And by the way, I always wanted to do that, right? And you know that he's not pretending to work there or pretending to be a garbage man in some weird way, because you know that he knows who he is and he's clear about what he's representing and what he's saying to you.
Hey, this order's on Trump. That's okay. I can do that, right?
Yes.
It's just that humility that you see from Donald Trump, that people are out there and, like Jason Whitlock, voting for the first time. There are going to be so many, I believe, first-time voters because he is resonating with people.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's going to happen. I think it happened in 2016. I think it's going to happen now, and even in a bigger way. Also, I wonder if we're just going to see record voting in general, right? We're going to see numbers that really smash the boxes, and that's going to be interesting as well. At the same time, though, you just can't take that for granted, right? I mean, it's Happy Halloween. We're all going to have fun, but if you can go out and vote tonight, you absolutely should. Because you cannot take anything for granted in the crazy environment in which we're living right now.
Yes, go out there, vote early, don't vote often. Only the Democrats do that. But you know what? MAGA Gear is having a moment. I'm sure that tonight at everybody's doorstep with all the trick-or-treaters, I'm sure that we're going to be seeing some excellent MAGA costumes out there. So tag us in them if you do see them. And Peterson, it's going to be a great Halloween this evening.
Oh, yeah. We're going to have a fantastic time, and I know you all will, too.
Don't forget to subscribe to Blaze News Tonight on your favorite podcast platform and rate and review the show. It helps everybody else to find it. And we'll be back tomorrow night to break it all down.